really wasn't at all until the 1960s that we had some sense that we had developed technologically to the point where some of what we could do mechanically might start to have planetary repercussions, say with, we saw that with air quality in cities, for example, and the denuding of the countryside, and then perhaps the overfishing in relationship to the oceans, which started to happen after World War II. But nobody had any sense, really until 1960, that, well, maybe we had to take care of things a little bit better than we were, because there was more of us. We were starting to become a force that was, to some degree, a match for nature. And bloody well, thank God for that, because nature was more than a match for us for a very long period of time, right? Our species has come up through epochs, eons of absolute brutal privation and difficulty and starvation and freezing temperatures and burning in the desert sun and lack of water and lack of hygienic facilities and like just hand-to-mouth suffering. And, we've managed to organize ourselves to the point where that's still the lot of a substantial number of people on the planet, but that's decreasing very rapidly. The UN now projects that by the year 2030, abject poverty, which is defined as living on less than $1.90 a day in today's US money, will be eradicated. There won't be anybody in the world that poor. And the cynics say, well, that's a pretty damn low barrier, let's say, but if you double it, you also see that's decreasing very rapidly. And if you triple it, you see that's decreasing very rapidly. And you got to draw the bloody line somewhere, and abject poverty is abject poverty. And the fact that it's decreased by 50% in the last 12 years, from 2000 to the year 2012, we decreased the absolute level of abject poverty in the world by 50%. Right? It was the fastest it was the most spectacular economic miracle in the history of humankind. And, you hardly ever hear about it. Hardly anyone knows about it. It's like, it's a bloody miracle. There's more middle-class people in the world now than non-middle-class people. And there are way more obese people than there are starving people. And so that's something to celebrate, I mean, it's a funny thing to celebrate, but it's quite the thing to celebrate. And the fastest growing economies in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa. And they're growing at 5 to 7% a year. So it looks like the economic miracle that took place in India and in China, most of Southeast Asia, is really starting to kick in Africa. And it seems, at least in part, it's because of the collapse of the Soviet Union back in 1989 and the lack of overt pressure to have African countries pursue the most pathological possible economic doctrines that anybody could ever imagine. They just stopped doing that, has freed people up to start to become, well, if not rich, at least richer, and at least with the possibility of a continual rise upward. The child mortality rate in Africa now is the same as it was in Europe in 1952. I mean, that's really something, and longevity rates have increased tremendously in Africa. And we're kicking the slats out of some major diseases. Polio's pretty much gone. It looks like we're putting a pretty good dent in malaria. That'll do great things for Africa. I think there's a real possibility with some concerted effort that we could get rid of tuberculosis in the next 15 years or so if we made that a target. That would be something. That's an ancient scourge of mankind. We could certainly do without that. So there are intelligent people who are working hard on trying to eradicate these problems, and they're doing it successfully.